Get started. My name is Brian Adler. I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs, and I want to welcome all of you here today. It's great to see all of the students. It's great to see guests from the City of Americus and surrounding areas. And we also want to welcome our special guests who are former veterans and POWs who are here for the events that will be starting today and continue through the weekend. I just want to say a quick word. Today, of course, is the day we recognize POWs and MIAs, and Brad Bennett, who is the superintendent of Andersonville National Historic Site, will, I'm sure, say more about that momentarily. Yesterday, however, was U.S. Constitution Day, and that's the day that by law we are mandated, all educational institutions, to have some sort of programming that recognizes what a unique document our Constitution is and the benefits and freedoms that have been guaranteed to us under the Constitution to celebrate that. And so we see really an event such as this today when we have such an esteemed individual as Mr. Norwood to speak to us as part of that recognition of the rights and privileges guaranteed to us under the Constitution. The other thing I want to say is just for all of us to bear in mind, of course, the horrible event that took place Monday in Washington, D.C. at the Navy Yard. We had, in essence, the largest single loss of life in our nation's capital since 9/11. And it's just an event that, again, boggles the imagination that we could have these kinds of things take place, especially on a military base in this case. But it's a recognition of the fact, too, that we live in a dangerous world and we live in a risk-filled world. And so it's always good for us to be able to celebrate human beings, men and women, who have been willing to sort of step up to the plate and be willing to assume those risks that really affect all of us at all times. Sometimes it's completely out of the blue and unexpected, as it was on Monday, and other times it's sort of part of the job package that we are willing to accept. I just want to recognize the fact that this event would not be possible without the help of many people. The Georgia Southwestern Convocation Committee has been integral in helping to put this together. But we also have a wonderful partner in terms of Andersonville National Historic Site. And we've worked together with one of the most unique sites in the United States. In terms of Andersonville, again, a site that recognizes the risk that was taken by many brave men and women over the last couple of centuries, in some cases with leading to a loss of life, and in all cases leading to a loss of freedom for a period of time. And we appreciate greatly that partnership that has been working so nicely together with our partner. And so at this point, I want to introduce to you the superintendent of the Andersonville National Historic Site, Mr. Brad Bennett.
Thank you, Dr. Adler, for that great introduction. The National Park Service does appreciate the long and productive partnership with Georgia Southwestern State University and your support of this 8th annual POW Convocation. Thank you, too, to the Friends of Andersonville for supporting today's program, and to all of the faculty and staff who've made this educational opportunity possible. I'd like to welcome all of our distinguished guests, members of the community, and most of all, you, the students in attendance today, as we observe National POW MIA Recognition Day and remember the courage, service, and sacrifice of our military members and their families. Before I introduce today's guest speaker, please allow me to remind you of several opportunities to meet other former prisoners of war this week, including many from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and more recent wars. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock p.m. in the Rylander Theater, Ms. Shoshana Johnson will tell her story of captivity from 10 years ago in Iraq. Ms. Johnson will also be appearing Friday at the National Prisoner of War Museum at Andersonville National Historic Site. That morning, At 9:30, thanks to the ride home, a new commemorative plaque will also be dedicated in the park to honor all women throughout American history who have suffered wartime captivity. And of course, more POW MIA programs will follow here on campus, courtesy of the ride home, throughout the rest of the week into Saturday, including tomorrow, for the 4th year in the area, the Vietnam Traveling Memorial Wall right here on campus. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's special guest speaker, Mr. William K. Norwood. Born in Tennessee in 1930, he left school early to support his mother and younger siblings. At age 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Army. Upon the outbreak of war in 1950, he was deployed to Korea and assigned to the 24th Infantry Division. After surviving 6 months of combat, he was captured by enemy forces in 1951. Back at home, his mother only knew that he was listed as missing in action until, after almost 2 years, she finally received a letter from her son from a POW camp in North Korea. 60 years ago, in 1953, after enduring 2.5 years of brutality and starvation, Mr. Norwood came home to America. Mr. Norwood is a life member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Disabled American Veterans, the American Legion, and various other military-related organizations. His military service awards include the POW Medal, Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Medal, Korean Service Medal with 10 battle stars, United Nations Service Medal, South Korean Government Service Medal, and the South Korean Government Presidential Medallion. In 1976, Mr. Norwood founded the Korean War ex-POW Association. Bill and his wife Liz, married for more than 57 years, live in his home state of Tennessee and are blessed with 2 children, 1 grandchild, and 2 great-grandchildren. Please join me now in welcoming the president of the Korean War ex-POW Association, Mr. Bill Norwood.
Thank you so much, Brad, for that introduction. Usually, someone will get up and say, well, here comes old Norwood again, so that is my usual introduction. But as Brad mentioned, I'm a veteran of the Korean War, often referred to as the Forgotten War. But I can assure you that those of us who served in Korea will never forget. The Korean War lasted 3 long, miserable years. We lost in excess of 36,000 Americans in combat. And it might surprise you to learn that more than 8,000 Americans were left in the MIA, missing in action category. A few of those have been recovered, but very few. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce some special people that's here today. First, someone who is extra special to me, someone who has stood beside me and supported me for almost, I got to get this right, 58 years of a happy marriage. She has tolerated my many faults during that period of time, and I'd like to introduce my wife, Liz. We also have a surviving spouse of one of my very best friends. She came all the way from Florida to be with us today, Nelda Young. Nelda, would you stand? And this old lady, some of you may have met before. We call her Miss Mo. She's the husband of our good friend Jim Moyer. Jenny, you stand up and be recognized. And my good friend and former POW, T.J. Martin, is with us today. Good morning again. Wow, I sure didn't expect to see this many people here today. Usually, when I'm invited to participate in a program, it's usually for a small audience over at the VFW Club, or perhaps a senior citizen event, which always seems to happen at their daily nap time. So, you guys, I might tell you to suggest you stay awake because there may be a test when I finish. So that, anyway, it is indeed a pleasure for me to be here today and to have the opportunity to express some of my views and to share some of my past experiences with you. It's my hope that something I might say would be of interest to someone and perhaps enlighten their day in some manner. If you happen to detect a sense of excitement in my demeanor, it's because I'm happy to be with so many young Americans, my very favorite people. These students who are students now, but someday may become the leaders of our country. Even the possibility that I could be speaking to a future president of the United States, because students, anything is possible in this great land that we call America. And some speak of our country as being outdated today. They would have you believe that the show and the demonstration of patriotism is unsophisticated, like backwoods thinking. And they would have you believe that it is politically incorrect to speak of America's greatness, of its independent spirit, and the freedom of speech and worship. But these things are a direct bearing on our lives in America today. Now, you can call me a flag waver if you wish. I don't mind, because I'm not ashamed to stand up and say that I get goosebumps when I hear the Star-Spangled Banner played or sung. And I swell with pride when I see the American flag displayed. My friends, I firmly believe that America, even with its faults, is still the greatest land in the history of mankind. And I do feel that in my heart. Now, if you feel as I do that America is the greatest, on the count of three, let's all shout America. 1, 2, 3. America! That was good, but I think we can do better. So on the count of three, let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. America! Oh man, I don't need my hearing aids. Sure, America has problems to work through, but there's no wonder that millions of Americans would like to come to America. They see America as the land of opportunity, the land where dreams come true. And this is true. But unfortunately, too many illegally. But they see America as the promised land. But we know that the benefits that we enjoy in America today did not just happen. Many Americans have sacrificed and paid the price of freedom by blood, sweat, and tears. Now, I witnessed many of those sacrifices when I was sent to Korea in 1950. I witnessed those many Americans, some and most, not even old enough to acquire a valid driver's license. But they stood toe to toe with a seasoned enemy, and they fought bravely. But after serving some 6 months of combat duty, my luck finally ran out, and I became faced with a soldier's greatest fear, a fear that is even greater than death. I became a prisoner of war. And considering what we had seen the enemy do to other Americans they had captured previously, I just reconciled the fact that my life was just about to end. And I began to prepare myself for my fate. Then something strange happened. My surroundings became very quiet, very still, and very bright. And I seemed to be floating in midair toward a large and a bright, shining light. And along the way, I saw my mother. She was hanging clothes on the clothesline, smiling and waving to me. What a peaceful and a serene state of mind. I did not want to return to reality and face what was in store for me, but eventually I did regain my senses, and at that time realized, Norwood, you were in a world of trouble. But after being kicked and shoved around for a few days, I joined a group of other soldiers who had also been captured and were engaged in a forced march across Korea to a permanent prisoner of war camp located in the extreme northern parts of North Korea along the Yalu River that separates Korea from China. Now, this was a long and a most difficult march that lasted for 4 months and covered a distance from south of the 38th parallel north to the Yalu River. Some say it was a distance of as much as 500 miles. Now, we could not travel during the daylight hours or even on the roadways for fear of being detected by American pilots. Them guys are always looking for targets of opportunity, and they had no way of knowing that we were also Americans. So we were strafed quite often, but instead of being able to march during those daylight hours, we were forced to stumble along those steep and narrow mountain trails in total darkness, carrying our sick and wounded buddies with us. For to leave one behind would mean certain death for him. We carried them on stretchers that we made from 2 long poles and a grass mat. It was not unusual to carry a person all night at daylight to discover that he had died during the night. We carried and tended the sick and wounded as far and as best as we could, but eventually the burden became too great for us in our weakened condition, and we were forced to leave many along the trails. It was our hope that the enemy would show enough compassion to treat their condition and perhaps even save their life. But this rarely, if ever, happened. We usually heard a rifle shot that ended their life. After a few weeks, those of us that had managed to survive finally arrived in Pyongyang, North Korea, the capital city of North Korea. We were tired, we were hungry, many were sick and wounded, and we were all severely depressed with a feeling that we no doubt had been written off as lost by our leaders and that we would soon be forgotten, even by our fellow Americans back home. At daybreak this one morning, we were herded into this old bombed-out building and had only sat down to rest when we were forced to watch this propaganda film. Now, this was a typical communist-prepared propaganda film showing Russia demonstrating all of her military might at the end of World War II, until near the end of this film, and there was a scene that showed all of the Allied forces marching through the streets of Berlin in victory, when all of a sudden there appeared on that screen the most beautiful sight that I will ever witness in my lifetime. A large, beautiful American flag. At the side of that flag, a loud shout went out from every American in that building, and all those that were able to do so raised to their feet, snapped to attention, and saluted that flag. And even some of the sick and wounded that could not stand alone demanded that they too be raised to their feet, that they might also take part in this joyous occasion. Well, of course, the film was stopped immediately, and the guy responsible probably lost his head. But we realized once again that we were still American soldiers, and we would not be forgotten regardless of the circumstances. And that crowd went wild. It took much prodding with bayonet points and the use of rifle butts to quieten that group of re-inspired Americans. Now, I've relived that scene many times in my life, and each time I am reminded of those radical individuals in our own country today who would dare to desecrate and to even burn the American flag and then hide behind that flag for the protection that it affords. To them, that probably would appear to be a most pathetic sight. A group of young, haggard, half-starved American soldiers, many thousands of miles away from home, deep in enemy territory where survival alone was a daily challenge, but yet who had the courage to stand up in the face of an armed enemy and risk serious injury or perhaps even death, simply to pay respect to their nation's symbol. Well, I say to those individuals, that might appear to be a pathetic sight to you, but to me, the sight of that flag on that dirty screen that day gave me the extra strength, the courage, and the determination not only to complete that march, but to survive an additional 2.5 years at the hands of a brutal enemy. Well, after a few days, those of us that were able to walk began our journey farther north. Only those who could walk were permitted to leave those transit camps. Those who could not walk were left behind and never seen again. Now, while there, our diet consisted of grain, which we shared with the livestock, cracked corn, barley, sorghum, and soybeans. Some of you probably never heard of that diet, but it's certainly, if you want to lose weight, that's a good way to do it. But I think I might need some of that now. We usually had no means to cook the grain, so we ate it raw. We usually slept outside, exposed to the elements, and put the sick and wounded in the huts or the livestock stables. An incident happened at one of the transit camps that will remain in my memory as long as I live. An 18-year-old soldier from the state of Washington, whose name was James Ray Emerson, did his sworn duty and escaped. Now, he didn't get very far, but in the process of his escape, he eliminated 2 enemy guards. And he didn't get very far until he was recaptured and brought back to the place where the compound where we were held, put before a kangaroo court, tried, and sentenced to death. He was forced to dig his shallow grave outside the building where we were housed. And we were forced to watch as he stood by his grave with his back to the firing squad. And when the commander demanded that he turn and face the firing squad, he refused to do so. Instead, he shouted in a loud voice, "Shoot me in the back like the cowards that you are." And they did. James Ray Emerson, an American hero, lies in that grave even yet today, forgotten by most, but remembered by those who witnessed his bravery. Sometime in August 1951, those of us that managed to survive finally arrived at a hastily prepared POW camp located in the village of Cheongsong, North Korea, designated as POW camp number 3, later changed to number 1. We found the conditions at this camp to be deplorable, with little, if any, improvements over the misery that we encountered during the march. The food was scarce and unfit for human consumption. The water was stagnated and filled with germs, which caused much illness and many deaths. There were no sanitation facilities or medical treatment. The mud huts where we were housed were so crowded it was impossible to get any rest. The guards were brutal and quick to inflict injury. In this one camp, it is estimated that 1,600 Americans either died of starvation, disease, froze to death, or were simply killed by the enemy. The enemy designated the hillside surrounding the camp as the burial grounds. And each morning, the bodies of those who had died during the night were placed on the ground in front of each hut. And those who were able to do so carried the bodies to the hillside, scratched out a shallow grave in the sometimes frozen earth, covered them as best we could, said a silent prayer because open prayer was strictly forbidden, and we left them there. This is a sad case that will remain in my memory as long as I live. After the so-called peace talks began and conditions did improve somewhat, the survivors of that ordeal composed a poem dedicated to those 1,600 that we left there. And if my emotions will allow me to do so, I'd like to recite that poem for you here today. It is a short and a simple poem, but it has true meaning because it comes straight from the heart. The title of the poem is simply The 1,600. Not a drum roll was heard, or a sad funeral beat, or even a bugle to sound retreat, as over the snow their bodies were hurried to yonder's hill where they are buried. 6 foot by 2 foot by just a few inches deep, there on that lonely hill they sleep. And when we go home, we will still wonder why that 1,600 had to die. There was no casket to enclose their breasts, just old GI clothing for their last rest. All colors of men, brown, black, and white. There were 1,600 fading light. There'll be no white cross to bear their name, but still they are buried in shame. Although they are in unmarked graves, they are still 1,600 of America's brave. In their illness while tossing and turning, most of them knew they would not be returning, but their battle is won, and now they are free. But they gave their life for you and for me. A pill or a powder or a medicine of any kind, or shall we say even a stronger mind, could have saved them from yonder's hill, the 1,600 who lie there still. God, please grant them comfort. This is our plea. God bless America and always keep her free. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill, for that inspiring speech. We've got about 10 minutes left, I believe, till y'all need to get to your next class. There is a microphone set up here, so if you want to carefully make your way down, Mr. Norwood would be happy to entertain any questions you might have about his growing up, his experience as a prisoner of war, or what he experienced when he came home. So, microphone's right here, and if you have trouble working your way down the aisle, I'd be happy to bring the microphone to you.
I must have done a pretty good job. I do have a hearing problem. As I told Brian, he may have to interpret for me, but I'd be happy to answer any question that you might have.
Just go ahead and raise your hand and get the mic to you.
I'm often asked, how did you survive? It was a matter of a strong determination, a strong will to live. And when you make a country boy mad, which they did, he will survive. And so that was one of my greatest, and also my dear mother at home on her bended knees had a great effect. I'm certain of that. She had a strong will, a strong spiritual will, And she never gave up. I didn't either. But I also had many friends that helped me along the way. And those friends are the most valuable thing to me, even yet today. So I wish everybody a good day. Okay.
Hello. Hi, thank you for coming. Did you have like a little Romeo and Juliet romance with your wife? No, this is serious. Like, did you have write letters in your mind or something? Did she see you in a dream?
Oh.
This is not funny. This is just
Okay. This was kind of a strange meeting in that one of my close friends in the POW camp was very ill, and the enemy, and I know some of the older guys will remember that they did a release of the sick and wounded, and he was among them, and I think it might have been her previous boyfriend, but I went to see him and met her. So that was the best move in my life. Here comes my interpreter again.
When you returned back to the United States, what was the first thing that you did?
What was the first thing you did when you got back to the United States?
Oh gosh, some of it I can't tell. But the first thing, when we were released and got rid of that tattered, lice-infected clothes that we had, we went to the shower, which is the first one we'd had in 3 years, and came out of the shower. The guy standing there with a little gadget like we used to spray our vegetables with us to keep the bugs away, and he's standing there spraying us with this thing, a powder, which I discovered later was DDT. Can you imagine being sprayed with DDT? And now it's banned from the market. But it was a strange feeling to walk out on the street and see the changes that had been made. The automobiles. The first thing I noticed was the girls' skirts were a little shorter than they were but it was an exciting time, and the government, Army, whoever, they didn't do things like they do now. The guys they bring back, they usually put them on an airplane and send them to the nearest airport at their home. We got off of the ship, went through the pay line, got a handful of money, and walked out on the street. San Francisco. I'd never seen a television. Everything is so strange. So there was 3 of us guys from Tennessee that decided that we'd buy us an automobile and drive home, get home quicker that way. But I spent a few hours with them, and I decided that's not going to work. So I bought me a train ticket and came home, and had to hitchhike the last part. But and these other 2 guys, 30 days later, their family was still searching for them. They had the grand tour. But thank you for listening, and have a good day.
give Mr. Norwood another round of applause. So good. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is about time for you all who do have another class to move on. But I just want us to recognize one thing before you leave, and that is this. Mr. Norwood's story dates from 1950 and 1953. There are not many people around to tell such stories, and what we are getting is timeless knowledge and wisdom. And it's such a privilege to be able to be exposed to this kind of information. If you look around for folks who fought during World War II, you're not going to find very many of them. They're just not around anymore, and no one is around from World War I. So to have individuals who are willing to share with us these experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the funny, is truly a blessing and a gift. And we should be very grateful that we get to spend a little time with individuals such as Mr. Norwood and learn his story, because there's application for our lives every day as we go forward. So thank you again for being here today. Thank you for your attention, and we will see you again. Have a good day.